She replied with just 3 words. No, never, never. That answer drove me to madness. I went to her father, placed my hand over the flame of a burning lamp, and told him, I will let this fire consume my hand until you agree. I would point at the paintings and tell them, this is worthless art. Good God, who would buy anything that way?
I mean, what the hell's wrong with you, Mr. Vincent?
I want you to imagine this nightmare with me. Imagine walking with your mother, when suddenly you find a grave before you. Engraved upon it is your name and your date of birth. So decided to give her the only thing I had left, a living piece of my own flesh. It was a mad gift. Let me tell you something that might make you question my judgment. I described this painting, one of my most famous works that you all know, as a failure.
Hey guys, and welcome to another podcast. Our guest today is perhaps the most famous artist in history, Vincent van Gogh. Today we will get to know him better and learn everything about him. So let's welcome our genius guest, Vincent. Welcome.
Well, hello and thanks for hosting me on your incredible channel that needs to be subscribed to, and a like left on every video.
Well, thank you, Mr. van Gogh. To begin, Mr. van Gogh, did you ever imagine in your life that you would become one of the most famous artists in history?
The irony. I was looking for love in the eyes of just 2 people, and I failed. And now, the whole world searches for love in my paintings. Tell me, what is the point of being famous in history when you are an outcast in reality? Believe me, my friend, in those long nights in Arles or in my small room in Saint Remy, the word fame never crossed my mind. I was only fighting to survive. I painted because I would have suffocated if I hadn't. Painting was my only way to tell the world, I am here. I exist. And now I'm not just a strange or gloomy person, as my father thought.
So let's assume you are alive right now. How would you feel seeing this fame and receiving the love you never got during your lifetime?
Perhaps this late love is fate's way of apologizing, but it is an apology delivered to an abandoned address. Yet, there is one thing that brings me peace. I am no longer that depressed stranger in people's eyes. Instead, I have become a brother to every suffering soul and a friend to every artist who fears failure.
Your metaphor of an apology delivered to an abandoned dress is heartbreaking, yet tragically true. The world may have been late to embrace you, but today you are not just a painter. People don't stand before your paintings just to see landscapes. They stand there to see themselves and their own pain reflected. Even your letters to Theo have become world-class literature, read with reverence. And artistically, you led a revolution that changed the history. You liberate color from reality while others painted trees green and skies blue. You used color to express emotion, not mimic reality. You once said, instead of trying to reproduce exactly what I see before my eyes, I use color more forcefully to express myself. Like when you painted peasants in early tones to symbolize their deep bond with the soil. And then there is the impasto technique. You applied paint so thickly that every brushstroke remained visible, making the canvas appear and breathe and move. Those swirly strokes in the Starry Night are not just a depiction of the sky. They are a portrayal of the turbulence and cosmic energy you felt within. This is why your art remains alive and immortal. But today we want to dig deeper. Tell us about your childhood. How was your character shaped, and where did your story begin?
I was born in 1853 in the Netherlands, to my father, the Reverend Theodorus, and my mother, Anna. Since childhood, I had set one goal before my eyes, to please my father and mother, even if that meant becoming a replica of them. For example, my mother was an amateur artist. She would take my siblings and me on walks in nature and teach us to draw. I was the only one who took it seriously, to the point where I would pick plants, sit at home, and draw them 1,000 times until I had mastered them completely. On the other hand, I used to say that my soul longed to embody the spirit of my father or grandfather, and to become a preacher like them. But this love was not mutual. The father I loved so much described me as strange, with a frightening tendency towards depression. And my mother? She was never satisfied with any effort I made, always preferring my younger brother, Theo, so I always felt that I was simply not enough.
I want to ask, why did your father describe you that way? Is it really possible for a child to have a tendency toward depression?
Why did he describe me that way? Because fathers, my friend, especially if they are clergymen like mine, love clarity. They love children who are like clear windows. You can see right through them. But me, I was a well. To my father, a normal child played, laughed, and obeyed. But when he looked at me, he saw a child staring at a dead ant for an hour, or crying because the wind had snapped a tree branch. He called that a frightening tendency towards depression. I called it an overflowing sense of life. My problem wasn't that I felt too little. It was that I felt more than a child's body could bear. You asked me if a child can be depressed. Yes, and brutally so. A child becomes depressed when he realizes far too early that he is a stranger to the herd. A child becomes depressed when he looks into his mother's eyes searching for a spark of joy, but finds only dullness or silent reproach. I wasn't depressed in the clinical sense. I was feeling the weight of existence. I felt my soul was older than my years, and that I was living in a world that did not speak my language. And when I was 11 years old, I faced a shock when my family sent me away to boarding school. That experience gave me a feeling akin to exile, a feeling that haunted me for the rest of my life. It drove me to constantly move from one city to another, trying to build a career to make my mother or father proud of me, hoping that maybe, just maybe, they would finally grant me the love never received from them. And that is exactly why I describe my childhood as austere, cold, and sterile. And after I finished my early schooling with excellence, my family told me, "Look, that is enough education. A man has nothing but his work and his home." So, from the age of 15, my brother and I went to work for our Uncle Cornelius, dealing in art. Even though I didn't finish my formal education, I taught myself English, French, and German. I did this just to help my uncle, but my conscience was constantly tormenting me. I was torn between the desire to be an artist surrounded, as I was, by masterpieces in the gallery, and the desire to follow in my father's footsteps and become a preacher. There were two people fighting inside me. One wanted to become a painter, creating beautiful works like those surrounding him, and the other wanted to become a priest.
So why didn't you make a decision? Why didn't you choose the path that was closest to your heart?
Because deep down, I was afraid to choose. I felt that I would be trapped in that choice forever. That conflict raged within me until one side finally won. My father's voice. Just imagine, a young man fluent in 4 languages, chasing customers away from his uncle's gallery. I would point at the paintings and tell them, "This is worthless art." Good God, who would buy anything that way? In their eyes, I was a disgrace, a source of shame. How could I dare describe the gallery's paintings as worthless? Naturally, my uncle fired me. Frankly, it was the least he could do.
Why did you describe those paintings as worthless? I mean, you loved painting at that time.
At first, my dear friend, one was mesmerized. I thought I was working in a temple of art, serving beauty itself. But over time, the mask slipped. Why did I see it as worthless? Because I discovered we were not selling art. We were selling commodities. Those paintings were elegant, polished, and perfect, but they were dead. They were painted to satisfy the tastes of the bourgeoisie people who wanted a painting to match the curtains of their salons, not to stir their souls. I saw customers paying fortunes for pictures of pretty women in fairy tale gardens. Meanwhile, the world outside was teeming with the poor, the peasants, and the sweat of the toilers, yet no one was painting them. I felt that those paintings were nothing but painted lies. How can a painting have value if it does not speak the truth? How can it have value if its only purpose is to hang above a rich man's fireplace, just so he can show it off to his guests?
Okay, so what did you do next?
After that, I decided to go to Amsterdam to study the Bible. But when it came to the Latin exam, the boy who could learn languages in the blink of an eye, refused to take it. I called Latin a dead language. As a compromise, I volunteered as a missionary in a mining town in Belgium. The church viewed this place as an exile, a sort of punishment. If a preacher wasn't good enough, that is where they were sent. There, I began to sketch the workers. Their poverty moved me so deeply, my friend, that I gave up the house the church had rented for me to a poor woman. Not only that, I gave away my possessions to the miners and lived exactly like them. The people started to love me. They even called me the Christ of the coal mines.
Why did you do all of that? I mean, what was the driving force inside you at that time?
I did all of this, but deep inside, I held a specific image of myself. I saw myself as a hero in this story, saving everyone. Just so I could return to my family with a tale proving was better than they thought. I wanted to finally earn the pride I had always yearned for. But what I saw as heroism, the church that sent me viewed as strange behavior. Their representative had turned into a homeless drifter with no house, living among the workers. Instead of preaching to them and imparting wisdom, I was sketching them. And so, the church decided to dismiss me. At that moment, I realized clearly, my dream of being like my father would never work. I needed to find a new dream. So, I tried to become like my mother. At the age of 27, I confessed to my family that I wanted to be a painter. I was shocked by my father's rejection, and even more by my mother's, the very woman who had taught me to draw in the first place. I found the mother who had instilled a love of art in me saying, "Forget this nonsense. Go find a real career that brings money."
You described your parents' upbringing as a strict system that would suffocate you forever. You spent your entire life trying to be exactly like them, and yet they were never satisfied. Was this the moment you decided to break away from them and finally live life on your own terms?
Amidst this abandonment, I found support in my brother, Theo, and remember this relationship well. At the time, Theo was working as an art dealer with my uncle. Unlike me, he didn't tell his uncle, "These things are worthless." No, he kept his job and maintained his career. Theo agreed to support me financially until I could study art and sell my paintings on my own. Now, you might think I said, "Fine, to hell with my family. I'll go to my brother, become a painter, and forget these people." But that is not what happened. Despite everything my family did, and despite my mother's cruelty, I kept trying to beg for her love. For instance, when she broke her leg in 1884, I went and painted the village church she could no longer visit. I did it just to make her happy, so she could see the church while sitting right there in her chair. And when her old black and white photograph began to fade, I wrote to Theo telling him I would paint her in color, simply to keep her presence with me.
Do you think this intense and perhaps cruel love for your mother is what shaped your romantic choices in the tragic way we all know?
Yes, perhaps you are right. In 1881, my widowed cousin, Kiva Stricker, came to visit my family with her children. The moment I laid eyes on her, I fell madly in love, simply because she reminded me of my mother. You can imagine that deep in my subconscious, I was projecting my need for my mother onto this woman. I thought, if this woman could love me, it would be as if my mother finally loved me. That was the one thing I never knew how to earn in my life. So, I proposed to her. And what was her answer? She replied with just 3 words. "No, never, never." That answer drove me to madness. I went to her father, placed my hand over the flame of a burning lamp, and told him, "I will let this fire consume my hand until you agree." Now, you might think her father was moved by such intense romance, or swayed by the passion of a dreaming young man. He just blew out the lamp. Yes, he simply extinguished it. And in the end, both her family and mine had to forcibly keep me away from her. A year later, I fled that town and went to The Hague. It was there that I fell in love with a woman named Seen. But Seen had a small problem in the eyes of society. She was a prostitute. She was pregnant by a stranger, and she already had a young daughter.
Small problem. I mean, did you truly love her, or were you simply trying to fulfill emotionally void after your previous failure?
I didn't just love her. I decided to save her and to marry her. In my drawings of her, you can clearly see my attempt to transform her from a whore into a respectable housewife. Take my drawing Seen with umbrella and prayer book. I portrayed her holding an umbrella and a prayer book. These were the exact same objects my mother used to carry when she took me to church as a child.
I mean, what the hell's wrong with you, Mr. Vince?
But, just as you guessed, this relationship was doomed. My family simply would never allow it to happen, and I created a painting where I revisited my memories of Key and Seen. I placed my mother and sister in the foreground, while in the background stood a woman embodying both Key and Seen. It was as if I were simply confessing that all along, I was merely trying to find my mother in them. My mother, who never understood my love for her. She eventually ran out of patience with my adventures. She wrote to Theo, telling him that my behavior had brought shame upon her and the family. And she ended her letter with one cruel sentence: "Lord, take him."
Why this pathological desire to be so close to your family? I mean, we all love our parents, but not with this obsession, not to the point where we see our mother in every woman we meet, especially considering how cruel they were to you.
I want you to imagine this nightmare with me. Imagine walking with your mother, when suddenly you find a grave before you. Engraved upon it is your name and your date of birth. Then, without warning, your mother weeps and embraces the tombstone. She forces you to visit this grave, to lay flowers upon it. While you understand absolutely nothing of what is happening around you, why is there suddenly such care for this grave? Why must I visit it time and again to place flowers? And most importantly, this grave bears my name. You might think this nightmare was just a dream that faded away, but it was a very real scene in my life, a scene that shaped my story forever. Let me tell you the bitter truth that might explain my behavior. I was not my parents' first child. 1 year before me, a baby boy was born. He was also named Vincent, but that child died at birth. And exactly 1 year later, I was born. The Vincent you know today. I took my dead brother's name and his birth date. I was even registered in the church records as number 29, the exact same number as my deceased brother. They didn't even bother to give me a new number. Perhaps the key to my tragedy was that I was the living embodiment of that dead child. Imagine a child seeing a grave with his own full name carved on it, time and time again. I was just an unsatisfactory replacement, a lost dream. When my mother forced me to visit my brother's grave every week and registered me in his place, she threw me into a competition I could never win. For I was not competing against a cousin or a relative. I was competing against a ghost. A ghost my parents saw as a flawless angel. The one who lived did the impossible to surpass this angel in their imagination. But no matter what I did, I could never match him or reach his level. Simply because the ghost story remained perfect, because it was never written.
But why were they objecting to fate? I mean, why didn't they see the opposite? For example, you were the compensation for the loss of the first son.
A very logical question. But grief, my friend, is selfish. They didn't see me as a compensation, because humans, by nature, worship what they have lost far more than what they still hold. My dead brother possessed a quality I did not, a quality no living person possesses: perfection. Because he died, he remained in their imagination as an obedient child, one who never cried, never screamed, and never made foolish mistakes. He became a sacred idea. But me? I was reality. And reality is always flawed, chaotic, and inconvenient. I was an eccentric child with fiery red hair and a sharp temper. Every time they looked at me, They didn't see Vincent the living. They saw a painful reminder that Vincent the perfect was gone, and that what remained in his place was merely a distorted version.
That makes sense.
And the cruelty is, my mother viewed any success I achieved as an attack on my late brother's memory. This might explain a very important fact about my art. If you look at my work, you will find that I am perhaps the artist who painted himself the most. I've even been called the first king of selfies. I painted myself as practice. After all, I was a poor artist. I couldn't afford a model, nor did I have the money to travel and explore new places. So, what was left? To sit in my room and paint the reflection in the mirror. It was cheap, and it was available, or perhaps I wasn't really painting myself. Maybe I was trying to paint the imagined face of the brother who died.
Okay, wait a minute. Were you painting yourself, or were you looking for your brother's likeness within you, or what exactly?
Honestly, I don't know. My brother and I share the same blood, the same genes. And since I never saw him, he's just a phantom to me. When I stare into the mirror, I see my red beard and my green eyes. But am I painting the sinner who is standing right here? Or the saint they buried? I think was trying to merge us. I was trying to make this face good enough to be that face.
But you were sitting right there in front of a mirror painting, so ultimately is you.
Look closely at my paintings. In one, I look as calm as a monk. In another, I look like a madman with burning eyes. In a third, I look sick and pale. I don't just paint what my eyes see. One paint what my soul feels. The mirror reflects the face, but the brush reflects the storm behind the face.
Okay, continue. What did you do next?
I turned to painting only after I despaired of ever receiving my parents' blessing. I leaned entirely on my brother Theo. He was my only friend. He didn't just support me, he loved me. He truly believed I was talented. He even said I would reach the same heights in art that Beethoven reached in music. But when I started learning in Antwerp, I grumbled constantly. The teachers obsessed over proportions and demanded I paint nature exactly as it is. I saw that as a shackle choking the life out of me. That is why my early works look like they belong to the old schools, painting the body with flawless anatomy, as if drawing for a medical textbook. I felt I was repeating my old mistake. Instead of trying to be my father or mother, I was now trying to be a copy of the old masters. I thought, I want to live with my own personality. What is the point of seeing nature and just copying it? Where is my vision? Where is my impression? Everything changed when I visited my brother in Paris and discovered the Impressionists. This movement began with Monet, who shocked the world in 1872 with his painting Impression Sunrise, or as you can see, an impression. The details are unclear. There are no sharp lines. It is like looking at a scene through the morning mist or through a pane of glass. You don't form a precise, detailed image. You form only an impression. Naturally, this painting was something new, and the critics attacked it savagely. Monet called it an impression because he didn't intend to paint a precise replica. He meant to convey his impression, his feeling, his gaze. He wanted to capture the fog and the blur. He painted not just for you to see the scene, but for you to feel what he felt in that moment.
And I believe what really shifted the perspective on this type of painting was the arrival of the camera back then. I mean, if you just wanted to see the nature as it is, just click the shadow button and that's it.
Exactly. And that's why they were called the Impressionists. Those who transfer their sensation of the scene, the shape of the light, the chill, or the heat that struck their eye. I found myself in this school because it was the first time the world ever asked me, you are not your father, not your mother, not your uncle, not the old masters, not your brother Theo, and certainly not the ghost of your dead brother. How do you see the world? Art was telling me, express this sensation. For the first time, I found something that demanded I be myself. That is why I said, as my work is, so am I, if you want to know me. Just look at my work. I began to paint the nature my mother showed me as a child. The plants, the sunflowers, the blossoms, the night, the sunset, and the wheat fields. But I did not paint them as exact copies, not as my mother wanted, nor simply as they appeared to the eye. Instead, I painted them through my own vision and my own sensations. Tell me, if I asked you to, imagine the sun setting over fields of golden wheat, how would you picture it?
Perhaps I imagine a nice, pleasant scene, stalks of wheat, blue sky, and a shining sun.
I didn't see it that way. I painted it as a pure impression, with dimensions and proportions set free. It is not what the eye sees. If you focus on the canvas, you won't find tiny details. You might look at the wheat and think, it looks like he didn't even make an effort to draw it. And the sky, it is just strikes of the brush. You won't find every single wheat stalk standing perfectly, or every cloud drifting in a neat line. No, there is an impression. There is an aura. We are not shackled by dimensions or ratios. It is not about what your eye sees in reality, but what your sensation can feel.
Mr. Van Gogh, I noticed your signature on all your paintings. You didn't sign with your family name, Van Gogh. You only signed your first name, Vincent. Why is that?
Deep in my subconscious, I was punishing them by refusing to carry my father's name. The name Van Gogh no longer felt like me. That name belongs to my father, the pastor, to my wealthy uncles, the art dealers, and to the family that was ashamed of me. I wanted to strip myself of their history. I wanted to be just a human being, with no titles, no family, no past. Just Vincent.
Okay, now I'm starting to like you, Mr. Vincent. Please continue. What did you do next?
During this period, I sacrificed everything for painting. I lived on nothing but bread and water. My paintings were considered very strange back then, even to the Impressionists. They were strange because they were so personal. I began painting my own impressions of myself. Look at this self-portrait. You can see exactly how I viewed my own soul. A man drowning in thought. My thoughts exploding in every direction through sharp, jagged brushstrokes. That is why they called my work post-impressionism. But the strangeness of these paintings made them unsellable. And even though selling art was Theo's original goal, he never once stopped supporting me. In 1888, I traveled to the city of Arles, where I lived in the Yellow House. This house was the birthplace of my dream. A dream shaped by painting. It didn't just allow me to find myself. It offered me the family I never knew how to find. My failure to win my parents' love and my failure in every romance of my life drove me to dream of a colony of painters. I wanted to turn my home into a sanctuary where I could live with the artists of my generation, forming one united family. And indeed, it happened. My brother Theo paid the French artist Paul Gogh 150 francs a month just to join me, to try to be my friend, and to start this dream of a colony with me. At first, I found in Gogh the friend and the artist could learn from. But after our artistic disagreements, Gogh threatened me to leave. And right there, I decided to cut off my ear. On December 23, 1888, you witness a truly bizarre scene. I walked into a private house, injured and in distress, with my ear wrapped in a handkerchief. I handed it to a girl there and told her, "Guard this object carefully." It was the first psychotic break that ever struck me. And my brother Theo, who suffered so much because of Marish, to my side. He stayed there, nursing me, until I was finally released from the hospital.
Yes, we all know about the ear incident. It might be the most controversial event in art history, but what we don't know is why. And why did you give it to a girl? Was it really because of your conflict with Gogh and the collapse of your dream?
You are asking for logic in a moment of absolute madness, my friend. Yes, Gogh leaving was the trigger. His voice saying, "Am leaving," felt like a death sentence. I imagined the loneliness coming back to devour me. The voices in my head began to scream unbearable noise. Perhaps I cut off my ear to silence those voices, or perhaps to punish the part of me that heard his rejection. And the girl, Gabrielle. She wasn't just a girl of the night. She was a maid there, and she was the only one who smiled gently at me in this cruel world. In that moment, I had no money, no mind, and no soul left to give. So decided to give her the only thing I had left, a living piece of my own flesh. It was a mad gift, I know, but in a twisted way, it was an act of love. My life in Arles became impossible. As I told you at the very start, I have always been prone to exile. The people of Arles filed a petition against me. They branded me as disturbed and a danger to the community. They whispered, "This man cuts off his own ear." So, in May 1889, I was committed to an asylum in St. Remy.
But what was the actual psychological diagnosis of your condition? Why exactly did they commit you to the asylum?
My doctor at the asylum, Dr. Perron, wrote one word in my report: epilepsy. But it wasn't the physical kind that makes you shake. It was a mental epilepsy. They said I suffered from acute mania with generalized delirium. Today, I hear you whisper, bipolar, schizophrenia, or even lead poisoning. To me, the name didn't matter. I simply called it the storm. It would come suddenly. The world would go dark. I would hear terrifying voices, and I would lose total control. Then, I would wake up days later remembering nothing. Nothing but a deep sense of guilt. If you look closely at those many letters, you will discover that no single disease alone can explain my life or my art. In my letters, I confirm that paint some canvases in a state of enthusiastic joy and others in deep melancholy. It is quite obvious. I want you to imagine that the man who painted this is the exact same man who painted that. How do we explain this? It doesn't take a genius. It is bipolar disorder. There's the first illness. Meanwhile, my romantic relationships and my bond with Gogh, where I always chose wrong, ending in intense attachment from me and repulsion from them, can be explained by borderline personality disorder. That is the second diagnosis. Moreover, anyone looking at my art might suspect OCD, a rigid perfectionism. I used to say I was trying to embody unspeakable perfection.
What exactly do you mean by unspeakable perfection?
Let me tell you about a specific painting of mine. In it, I did not embody ordinary perfection. Instead, my brush caught a complex pattern, one that physicists have struggled to understand or predict. For instance, in 2004, scientists using the Hubble telescope observed swirls of gas and dust around a distant star. The moment they saw them, they connected them to my most famous work, the Starry Night, which I painted within the walls of the St. Remy Asylum. When scientists analyzed the painting, observing how I depicted the light and the spirals, they discovered that I was able to describe what they call turbulent flow. You might wonder in amazement, really, Vincent? Were you actually able to describe turbulent flow? Let me explain to you what turbulent flow is. The human mind is designed to notice repeating patterns, to see a pattern repeating itself. That is how the mind works. A repeating pattern means, for example, if you throw something, it falls. Your mind notices this, and over time, they explain it with the law of gravity. But when gases and liquids move, they sometimes create incomprehensible patterns that are difficult to predict. You see a gas, for instance, and you don't know which direction it will go, in what proportion, or at what density. So many questions. Cigarette smoke, for example. It is impossible to predict its movement. This is what is known as chaos theory, where you simply cannot know exactly which direction the smoke will take.
But scientists also discovered something else. They found that you were only able to paint this specific style, this turbulent flow, with the mathematical accuracy when you were in a state of psychosis. Is that true?
It seems they have caught me again. Yes, it is frighteningly true. When I was sane and calm, my paintings were still. I painted walls, pipes, faces with fixed features. They were polite paintings. But when the storm hit my mind, and when logic collapsed, that is when I saw the universe unfiltered. I didn't see the sky as a blue ceiling anymore. I saw it as a river of energy flowing. Madness, my friend, breaks the cage of the mind. And when the cage breaks, you don't just see the stars. You feel how they spin. Pain was the price I paid to see what no one else could see. Through this obsession of mine, I was able in a way to reach perfection in capturing the enchanting movement of light. All of this, in a night scene I painted from the window of my room in the mental asylum. Imagine that. But let me tell you something that might make you question my judgment. I described this painting, one of my most famous works that you all know, as a failure. I didn't even want to send it to my brother in Paris to display it, just to save the cost of the postage.
A failure. It has become almost the most famous painting in the world. Its value might reach $500 million today. But it's not even for sale because it hangs in the Montmartre Museum.
I used to trade my paintings for a dinner, sometimes just for a glass of wine. And now you tell me my failure is worth a king's ransom? And it hangs in a museum in New York? This is fate's cruel joke, my friend. Humans love the dead artist, but let the living artist starve. If I had just 1% of that money back then, maybe, just maybe, I wouldn't have pulled the trigger. Yet, in spite of all this misery, there was sweet news. Sweet news like a painting of mine finally selling for 400 francs. That is what my brother Theo told me in his letter. Of course, the buyer was the sister of a friend of mine. She was trying to support me, so she bought the Red Vineyard. But still, it was an achievement. It was the first painting ever officially sold, but that wasn't all. I received even sweeter news. News that proved I wasn't hated by everyone close to me as I had thought. On the contrary, there were people around me who loved me very much. My brother Theo sent me the wonderful news. On January 31st, 1890, Theo's wife were blessed with a son, and they named him Vincent, after me. Vincent van Gogh. In that news, I found redemption. A redemption from that unjust naming Elbor as a child. The name that placed me, my entire life, in a comparison with a non-existent angel. In a race where I was always running and always losing. In that moment, I began to look at the name Vincent van Gogh completely differently than I had all my life.
You really had a great brother. How would you describe him?
Great? That word is too small. Theo was not just a brother. He was the other half of my soul. When the world saw a madman, he saw an artist. When everyone slammed their doors in my face, he opened his heart and his wallet to me. Imagine a man starving himself in Paris just to send me money for paint in Arles. He carried the cross of my madness on his back his entire life without a single complaint. I painted the canvases, yes, but Theo created me. Without Theo, all these colors would have died inside my chest, unseen by anyone. He wasn't just my brother. He was the only one who believed in me.
Many sources now claim that you didn't commit suicide and that you didn't even own a gun. They suggest you likely died at the hands of bullies who used to torment you while you painted, and your masterpiece was filled with crows, is seen by many as a pathetic vision of your end. Hazy field, crows flying away in panic, as if they had just heard the sound of a gunshot. It is a magnificent painting, almost as if you were watching the scene from the outside.
Does it really matter how it all began? Whether it was my own exhaustion with life, or a reckless mistake made by someone too young to understand the weight of consequences. The ending felt the same. I had reached a point where continuing no longer felt possible. When the authorities questioned me, as I lay wounded and fading in and out of awareness, I asked them not to blame anyone. Perhaps I said that because I had already given up on myself. Or perhaps because I could not bear the thought of a child's future being destroyed by a single careless moment. As for the crows, yes, that painting was my farewell. A road with no destination, a horizon closing in, a sky pressing down. And the crows? They were not escaping a sudden noise. They were moving toward me.
Yes, and mere months after your passing, Theo died too. And do you know, despite your constant fear of your brother's wife, seeing her as the one who stole him from you, I tell you now, the entire world is in debt for this woman, Johanna Banger, the pianist and Theo's wife. She's the one who transformed you from a painter who sold only one canvas in his life into the legend we all know today. Johanna collected your works and organized them and presented them to the world, all to fulfill Theo's dying wish that his brother would reach the stature of Beethoven in art.
Look at the ironies. The very people I feared and felt threatened by are the ones who immortalized my name, while the people I loved were the ones who, at times, tried to erase my legacy and erase me. Cinema will immortalize me, Van Gogh, as the obsessed artist who sacrificed his life for his art. But in the true story, art is what saved my life. I used to say that through art, I could transform any tragic, sad, or ugly scene into a beautiful painting. In my canvases, the miners, the tired, toiling poor, turned into sweet, beautiful art we love to contemplate. A miserable prostitute, whose life was nothing but sorrow, turned into a tender wife, while a sunset, an old shoe, or a sunflower, those daily objects you see every day, turned them, with my own hands, into eternal beauty. Even my final scene, my departure from this world, I managed to turn it into an aesthetic scene in a painting. I managed to paint the magic of the beautiful life that I never knew how to live. Yes, it is not merely talent. It is talent paired with relentless toil. It was the only sanctuary where I could truly be myself, free from the prison of my father, my mother, and the shadow of my dead brother. And leave you with these words: let us find the courage to live our own story, not the role scripted for us. Let us be patient and kind, even if the very first love offered to us by our family was neither kind nor made for us. And let us never fear being called strange or different, for perhaps your difference is not your curse. It is the very signature that distinguishes you from all mankind.
Thank you, Mr. Van Gogh. You may return to rest in peace now. Thank you guys for watching, and goodbye.